Chapter 2 of Greenwood Tales. How a Poor Knight Came to Robin Hood's Inn. It was near noontide in Sherwood Forest. Overhead the summer sun shone high and hot, piercing the branches and broad leaves of the giant oaks, falling in great splashes of yellow light upon the forest grass, making all the woodlands warm and still. Half the forest world seemed lulled into a noonday sleep. Only the birds twittered joyously, and the insects kept time to their tuning, humming a drowsy lullaby. Under the mighty tree that all Sherwood knew as Robin Hood's oak, a man in green stood lazily, his back to the huge mossy trunk, staring absently up into the branches over his head. He was tall and fine-limbed, with a much-tanned face, merry brown eyes that twinkled constantly, a head of curling brown hair, and a short beard of the same colour. He stood with one green-clothed leg crossed over its fellow. His green cap was tucked carelessly into his belt. A tall quarterstaff and a great bow and arrows lay on the grass at his feet. Presently the stillness of the forest world was broken by the sound of footsteps, firm and hasty, brushing aside the underwood, and next instant 3 more green-coated men came into sight in the open space before the big oak tree. They came up to the absent-faced fellow rearing himself against the tree trunk, and 2 of them sank down upon the grass, whilst the third, the tallest of all, stood still and said, "Dinner awaits ye, Master Robin, at your lodge." "And 'tis as fine a piece of deer's flesh," added Midge, the miller's son, from the grass, "as ever I turned upon a spit." He rolled over on his back and licked his lips. "And there is trout, fresh from the stream," put in Will Scathelock, who sat beside him. Little John, the tall man, still stood and looked at his leader. Robin slowly turned his eyes from the green branches above him and looked at his companions, smiling. Then, "I have no mind to dine yet," he said. "Gramercy!" Scathelock sat bolt upright with a jerk. "Are ye ailing, master?" "No," the other smiled, broader. "But a good dinner is naught without a guest to share it. I lack a guest." "Do you say so?" Midge waved a hand towards his companions. "Here are 3, he laughed, "and the rest of the lads await ye at the lodge." "No, I meant a stranger guest. See here, I have a mind that some fine soul shall dine with me today. Therefore, take your ways to the highway, to Watling Street, and bring me the first noble stranger who passes along." "To share the dinner," Little John bowed. "But what manner of stranger, say you?" "Archbishop or bishop," came the answer. "Abbot or haughty knight, or any that has a proud bearing. But the poor folk you know well, and you shall let them pass without a word. I will await you at the lodge." "You'll not wait long," answered Little John with a flourish, and the other 2 sprang to their feet. All 3 started off, but Robin called them back for an instant, and then, his eyes twinkling, wagged a warning finger at them. "Keep in your minds," he said solemnly, "the High Sheriff of Nottingham." At this the others roared with laughter, for the sheriff, a meddling, blustering, pompous fellow, who had sworn that Robin and his rogues should all be some day caught and clapped in Nottingham Castle and then hanged, was their open foe. But they laughed at him, for Master Sheriff had by no means a brave heart, and his "some day" was very long in coming, because it was known that he had a wholesome fear of Robin's army of men in green. The 3 friends swung quickly through the forest and came out at last upon the highway that bordered it upon one side. The long road stretched before them, empty and hot and white beneath the glaring sun, and the men took up their stand behind a great beech tree by the wayside and there set themselves to wait. For a long time they were quite silent. The sunny countryside was very still, and not a single traveller afoot or on horseback passed up or down the road beneath the beech tree. Presently Scathelock yawned. "I am hungry," he said in a grumbling tone, sliding to the grass. "I'll warrant they'll not wait for us at the lodge, and meantime we might stay here till sundown before—" "Shh!" It was Little John's voice, coming warningly. Scathelock looked up, craned his neck round the tree trunk, and then noiselessly got to his feet. 100 yards away, upon the dusty road, a man was riding slowly down towards the beech tree. His steed, ambling steadily on with drooping head and ears, seemed utterly weary and without spirit. The man himself no less so. He had a noble, kindly face, with mournful eyes and a gentle mouth. His tunic, cloak, and cap, once of costly scarlet velvet and silk, were battered, soiled, and weather-stained. As he rode, he stared straight ahead with a sorrowful, vacant gaze that seemed to see nothing. He held the bridle slackly, his head drooped like his horse's, one foot hung limply out of the stirrup, as if the rider had forgotten that he was mounted upon a horse at all. The three men hidden behind a tree watched him curiously for an instant. The tired horse ambled on. "A knight," whispered Skaithlock at last. "As I live, a knight, and a noble one. Now," they stepped into the road, three tall, fine figures in green. The horse came to a standstill as they blocked his way. Little John stepped forward, bowing low, feathered cap in hand. Then he laid a firm hand on the bridle. "You are welcome, Sir Knight," he said in smooth tones. "Right welcome to us in the Greenwood. My master awaits you to join him at dinner." Ah. The man on the horse straightened himself and looked at John as though he were bringing his thoughts back to the present from a long way off. "Yes," he said in a faraway tone. "And who may your master be, good fellow?" John smiled. "Robin Hood is his name, sir," he answered. Something like a gleam of interest came into the mournful eyes. "I have heard of him," said the knight gently, and nodded. "I have heard, too, that he is a good yeoman and a gentleman. Well, since it is his will and your will, lead me to him. Though," he added, sighing, "I did purpose to push on to Doncaster town and there to dine." "You will fare as well at Robin Hood's Inn in Merry Sherwood as any hostel in Doncaster," Midge assured him, and turned the tired steed towards the shady forest. The knight gave a sad little smile and fell into silence. The three men looked at one another as they led horse and rider deep into the woods, but something made them keep silent too, and the little procession went on its way slowly. Again the look in the knight's eyes had grown far away and sorrowful. Several times he sighed heavily, and once raised his frayed silk sleeve hastily to brush away some gathering tears. "Bless me," whispered Skaithlock in Midge's ear at last. "Have we ever brought to our Robin such a grieving guest as this Master Melancholy? What, man, we're not leading him to his hanging?" But Little John frowned him into silence, and so, still in silence, they came to the outlaw's woodland lodge. Robin Hood came out to receive them, merry-eyed and smiling, his bare brown head shining in the sunshine. "Welcome," he cried, "Sir Guest! Welcome and thrice welcome to Robin Hood's Inn. We have waited long for you." He helped the knight from his horse, still talking, and something in his cheery tone seemed to arouse the sad-faced stranger. "I am glad to meet you also, friend," he said. "I have heard very much of Robin Hood and of his merry men." The lodge was large and airy, formed of tree trunks and cut boughs, cunningly built and intertwisted to form secure walls and a roof. And within, Robin brought his guest water in a quaintly carved ewer that he might wash away the dust of travel. But because of the heat of the day, the dinner had been laid outside, spread out upon a fine linen cloth upon the soft green grass. Of food and drink there was plenty, and that all of the best. Wheaten bread and rich wine, white fish from the streams, deer's flesh and fowl and fruit. All these were kindly pressed upon the stranger, for Robin and his men knew how to entertain a guest right royally when they set their minds to the matter. In the face of so much kindness and good cheer, a little of the knight's sadness seemed to melt away. He put aside his shabby cloak, lay full length in the shade upon the cool grass, and talked and listened and even smiled. Then Robin, ever proud of his follower's skill, must needs show his guest a trial of shooting with bow and arrow, after which tall Midge and Little John had a bout with their oaken quarterstaves, and everything the knight watched and praised, and declared that Robin Hood's men were the finest in the country, and he knew of none to match them. So they passed that long afternoon of summer sunshine. But when the sun, the fiery globe, showed low in the sky through the woodland trees, the stranger rose and said he must be riding. "And I thank you, master," he turned to Robin, "for the best and pleasantest dinner I have eaten this many a long week. Be assured that if ever I ride this way again, you shall not need to call for such a dinner in return if I can provide it for you." The old sad look crept back again, and once more he sighed. Robin smiled at the words. "I should be hungry and greedy both, I think, indeed," he said, "to be driven to call St. Hubert preserve me upon any man for a dinner. But come," his gay tone did not change but grew suddenly firmer, "I must tell you the custom of Robin Hood's Inn, and the password, which is, pay ere you go. Come, Sir Knights, you've had dinner, and a good dinner from our hands. But it was never a custom, think you so, for a yeoman to pay for a knight." Then he came closer, and the men in green clustered about him. "Pay ere you go, sir," he said. A little frown of distress came between the knight's brows. He looked straight into Robin's eyes, then dropped his own, flushing red. "I am ashamed," he said in a low voice, "that what I have with me, All I have in the world is not enough to give in payment for so good a dinner to so gentle a host." "How?" Robin lifted his eyebrows in astonishment, and at the same time his lips made a motion to Little John. "Go and look," they said, and John stepped over and took up the knight's cloak, searching his pockets. "Now," Robin looked full at the man before him, "tell me the truth, as you claim to be a true knight, sir." And the knight looked back at him, steady and sadly, then answered, "This is the truth, good master, and so may heaven help me. I have no more than 10 shillings in all this world." Again the outlaw looked at him, and this time there was gentleness in his brown eyes. "I think you speak the truth indeed," he said, "and if that be so, not a penny shall we take from you, but rather, if you have need of it, we can make shift to lend you more." The knight turned aside in silence, his face to the slow-sinking red sun. Little John laid down the cloak and stepped close to his leader. "Master," he whispered in Robin's ear, "it is even as he says, poor soul. There are but 10 shillings there." The outlaw's eyes grew soft again. He walked over to his guest and touched the sleeve of his shabby tunic very gently. "Come," he said, "Sir Knight, let us talk over this matter across a bowl of wine. Tell me your name truly, and truly also whether you be a noble knight and an honourable one, and what evil fortune has led you to such a pass as this." He flung himself upon the grass as he spoke, and the stranger sat down beside him. "I tell you no more than the truth, Master Robin," he said, "when I tell you that I am a true knight, and an honourable one, as my ancestors have been for 100 years before me, and my name is Sir Richard Lee." He smiled a little, and then sighed and went on. "In my happier days, not so far gone, alas, I had all that a man might crave for, houses and lands and riches. But heaven has seen fit to take all these from me, and to leave me nothing but my wife and my children. Sweet saints be thanked," he finished half to himself, "I still have them." "And how came ye," Robin questioned, "to lose land and money both?" "I had a son," said the knight in the low voice, "a lad of 20, who, in a quarrel, killed a noble knight of Lancashire and his squire. It was to save him from shame that I have sold my goods and given my riches." "And your lands, sir?" questioned Robin again. "They are forfeit too. I have signed a bond to a rich abbot, whom you may know, of St. Mary's Abbey. He will take them all too readily, for, alas, as you see, I have nothing left to redeem them. And the money that he pays, with that I must leave this fair country, and sail away to foreign lands and hide my head beneath an eastern sky." "Will you tell me the sum that you owe?" asked Robin gently. £400 was the heavy answer, and again the knight got to his feet. "See, the sun is low behind the trees. I and my poor fortunes must be jogging. Fare you well, good master, and again thanks." "No, softly, sir." Robin's hand was on his sleeve again. "Where are your friends?" he said. "Is there not one who would lend thee the sum to redeem those lands that are forfeit?" The knight gave a little bitter laugh. "Whilst I had plenty and to spare, I had friends, many a one. But now they would tell you they have no use for a man's empty coffers and cupboard." The men in green looked at one another and then looked away. Little John turned aside, muttering, "Now may the saints bear me witness. This is the most sorrowful story I ever heard." "Well, well," Robin scrambled to his feet, smiling. "I think no man fallen upon evil fortunes ever fell so low, but that he might fall even lower. Come, I know you for a true knight, Sir Richard, and I can well lend you the sum you stand in need of. Go to my treasury, John, and count up £400. And, John, see that you stint not in the counting." Like an arrow, Little John was off, and Midge and Skaithlock after him. In the lodge they opened Robin's coffers, so well filled with gold and silver, and there John counted out the sum in scores, but every score was £22 in gold pieces. "Faith!" cried Midge, looking on. "John, this is a new way of counting." "What would ye?" John demanded. "'Tis alms for a poor and gentle knight." Back at Robin's side with the money bags. "Master," he said, "the knight's clothes seem neither so warm nor so fine as they once were. He must have a new suit. What say you? Give him some of your scarlet and green. You have as good a store of cloth as any merchant in fair England." "Well, that is true," cried Robin. "Measure out for him 3 yards of every colour of cloth. Full measure, mind you." And from the piles of bright silk and velvet and cloth, John measured off yards that were 6 feet long instead of 3, for he took no measure but his own mighty bow of yew. Ye'd make but a very poor draper, observed Midge dryly, but Skaithlock roared of laughter and said John could afford to give good measure, since it was costing nothing in the giving. When the bundles of cloth and the money bags were securely packed, John spoke again. Master, he cannot carry all this on foot. He must have another horse. Saddle the new grey courser then, smiled Robin, and see that the saddle be a new one. No, give him a horse to ride and a palfrey to carry the goods. And a pair of boots, master, put in Skaithlock. And you, Little John, Robin turned to his favourite. What would you give him? A pair of gilt spurs, answered John very heartily, and the wish that heaven may speedily help him to better fortunes. They pressed around Sir Richard, offering this and that. One held his horse as he mounted, a second tied his bales and bags upon a sturdy little palfrey, a third fastened the glittering spurs to the shining new boots. Half bewildered, the knight spoke to Robin. When shall the day of payment be, master, to return in full so many kindnesses? Why, this day 12-month, came the careless answer, here under the greenwood tree. I will remember, said Sir Richard solemnly. But Robin looked at him thoughtfully for an instant, then at Little John, and then back again at the knight. You should have a squire or yeoman to attend you, he said. Here, sir, I will lend you Little John for as long as you need him, for he will serve you well and faithfully. And when you want him no longer, he shall come back to me. And now farewell, and heaven be with you, sir. The men in green drew up in a body and watched the knight and his new follower set off slowly through the dusky woods upon their journey, following the little procession with their eyes until it was lost beneath the trees. Then Skaithlock gave a little laugh. Think you he will come back upon the day of reckoning, master? He said. Aye, Robin answered quietly. I think he will. And he was right. For when the year rolled round once more and summer came again to the greenwood, it brought with it the faithful Little John and the no less faithful Sir Richard Lee, laden with wealth enough to pay off his debt in full to the kindly hosts at Robin Hood's Inn.